Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to give you some book recommendations that remind me of Studio Ghibli movies. So if you are a Studio Ghibli fan, you are in the right place. First book I want to recommend to you is The Girl Who Drank the Moon. And to me, this feels like a combination of the whimsical storybook setting of Howl's Moving Castle and the young witchy protagonist of Kiki's Delivery Service. This book begins in a small town in which every year they sacrifice a newborn baby to the evil witch of the woods. Meanwhile, once a year, the witch who lives in the woods finds a newborn baby at the edge of the woods, and because she doesn't want this newborn baby to starve, she scoops up the baby and takes it somewhere else where she knows it'll be taken care of. One year, when the witch is doing her yearly ritual of saving these poor sacrificed newborn babies, she accidentally feeds the child moonlight, therefore giving this little girl magical powers. So the witch decides to take in this little girl herself and help this little girl understand how to use her magical powers. So we follow Luna as she grows up and she's living with this witch and learning to use her powers. She reminds me a lot of Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, like I mentioned before. So if you love Kiki, you will love this book. It is so cute, so sweet. It's about how not everything is as it seems. The evil witch that you think is evil isn't really that evil. The big and scary dragon isn't as big or scary as you think it is. And so it's very fairy tale, very whimsical, and so wholesome. For this next book, I need you to imagine the setting of Ponyo, specifically the house that Sosuke and his mother live in, that's on the hillside overlooking the sea. That is the setting for our next book, which is House in the Cerulean Sea. This book is about an orphanage on the seaside. This orphanage houses magical children, and we follow a social worker who is being sent to evaluate this orphanage because the government body or organization that he works for has recently been made aware of a dangerous child at this orphanage. And so they want this social worker to go evaluate it and see if this orphanage should be closed down because of this dangerous child. This social worker goes, he meets these children. They are so sweet and they're kids. They're just kids. They're sweet, they're cute, they're rambunctious, and he needs to decide if he's going to follow the rules like he always has his whole life, and he's going to go back to the organization and say, yes, there is a dangerous child, we need to shut this down, or if he's going to do the right thing and protect these young kids who can't help where they came from. The next book recommendation is Lonely Castle in the Mirror, and this book starts out in our world where we meet a young girl who is being bullied at school so badly that she doesn't want to leave her room anymore. One day, as she's in her room, the mirror in her room starts to glow, and a portal opens to a magical castle where she meets 5 other kids who are there because they are looking for a sanctuary of their own. And so these 6 kids get to know each other, get to become friends when they need friends the most. To me, this story reminds me of the portal that opens up into a magical world that is featured in The Cat Returns, with the focus on friendship and connection that is so important in Whisper of the Heart. The next recommendation I have is The Wild Robot. This book is about a robot who is made to serve humans, but this robot has to learn to adapt because she washes up on a deserted island that is only inhabited by wild animals. So this robot has to adapt to learn to communicate with the animals, to live in this wild environment. And it is such a wholesome, comforting story, such a very encouraging story of how one can adapt to fit in with a new environment, to make friends in this environment. And also a central plot line in this story is that this robot finds a gosling that doesn't have a family, and so she raises the gosling and takes care of it until it's a full-grown adult, which is really cute. And so to me, this book feels like the wholesome, family-focused themes that you see in My Neighbor Totoro, but with the foresty, natural setting of Princess Mononoke. The next recommendation I have for you is The Monk and the Robot duology. And this is a series of 2 books about a monk in a utopian, futuristic world. This monk just feels a little bit stuck in their life, a little bit unsure of what they want to do with the rest of their life. And so they go off on this journey, on this adventure to try and find themselves and trying to figure out what they want for their future. And while they're on this little adventure, they come across and meet a wild robot, kind of like the wild robots in Castle in the Sky. And together, this robot and this monk get to know each other, get to become friends, and help each other figure out what they want out of life, what both of these characters want, and what their places are in this world. It is very comforting. I read both of these books a couple years ago as I was going through a career transition. And so to read these books about not knowing what you want and feeling stuck and wanting a change, but not knowing what kind of change you want was very comforting to me at that time. And both of these books also feel a little bit philosophical. They ask you questions that get you thinking about what you want for your own life and how you want to make your own mark on the world. I love these books, and I highly recommend both of these books to anybody who is feeling any of those feelings, who feels a little bit stuck, who's trying to figure out what their next step is. Another similarly philosophical book that I want to recommend is How Do You Live? This is a Japanese novel about a young boy who is writing letters back and forth with his uncle and just asking similar questions that are asked in The Monk and the Robot duology of how do you live? What do I do with my life? How do I decide where I want to go and what I should do and who I should be? And so it's this conversation between this young boy and his uncle. And this book is a childhood favorite of Hayao Miyazaki and inspired parts of The Boy and the Heron. The plot of these 2 stories is very different, but it does take inspiration from a lot of the themes that are discussed in How Do You Live? So if you like The Boy and the Heron and some of the themes about grief and growing from that and finding inspiration again after going through something difficult, then I think you would like How Do You Live? Now moving on to a couple of books that more directly inspired Studio Ghibli movies, I do want to recommend Howl's Moving Castle. Yes, that movie is inspired by a book. It is an adaptation of the book by Diana Wynne Jones. So if that is one of your favorite Ghibli movies, give the book a try. Another one is Kiki's Delivery Service. That movie was also adapted from a novel. So obviously, if you like those movies, you should check out the corresponding books. And finally, I do have a couple of graphic novels that I want to end this video on because the art style of these graphic novels and the color palette just reminds me of the whimsy and joy that I feel when I watch Studio Ghibli movies. These graphic novels are the Tea Dragon Society collection as well as the Mothkeeper. Both of these books are by Kay O'Neill, and so really anything by this artist and graphic novel author I would recommend if you love the look of Studio Ghibli movies and you want some graphic novels that have that same kind of bright, vibrant illustration style. And those are all of the books that I have to recommend to you if you are a fan of Studio Ghibli movies. If you have watched this video and up until this point, please comment this emoji down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you want more book recommendations based on movies, check out this video I made last year about books that remind me of the Disney princesses, and consider subscribing to my channel because I like to make videos like this where I recommend books based on my favorite movies. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble about books, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye.